My name is Linda, and I am 72 years old. There is a story I need to tell, a confession I've kept locked in my heart for decades. As the years have crept by, the weight of my secret has only grown heavier. I owe it to myself and to the memory of the man I hurt to finally speak the truth. However, Jack and I met as teenagers in a small Ohio town. He had warm brown eyes and a shy smile. In the summer of 1968, under the golden evening light by the old oak tree in my parents' backyard, he asked me to marry him. He was so nervous, he nearly dropped the ring box. I laughed and cried at the same time when I said yes. We were young, hopeful, and madly in love, believing our future would be bright and simple. Not long after our wedding, the world around us shifted. The Vietnam War raged overseas, casting a shadow even over our quiet town. Jack felt the call of duty. His father had served in World War II, and Jack grew up on stories of honor and sacrifice. In 1970, when Jack told me he enlisted in the Army, my heart clenched with both pride and fear. I was proud of his courage and devotion to our country, but terrified of what it meant. He would be leaving me, heading into danger far from home. I still remember the morning he left for basic training. The late summer air hung heavy with humidity and heartache. We stood by the bus stop trying to be brave. Jack held my hand so tightly his knuckles were white. "I'll be back before you know it," he whispered, brushing a tear from my cheek. I nodded and forced a smile, trying to believe him. As the bus pulled away and I waved through the dusty window, it felt like half of my world vanished. I walked home alone under a pale, empty sky, already feeling like a part of me was missing. During his deployment, letters became our lifeline. Every few weeks, an envelope with an Army postmark arrived, and I would tear it open the moment it landed in my hands. His words always tried to reassure me. He described monsoon rains flooding the camp, local children waving at convoys, and the camaraderie among his fellow soldiers. He spared me the horrors of combat. Even from afar, Jack tried to protect me. He ended each letter, proclaiming his love and the dreams he was fighting for. The little white house we'd live in, the family we'd start, the future we imagined. I pressed those letters to my heart after reading them, as if I could draw him out from the ink and back to me. I wrote back constantly, giving him a piece of home to hold on to. I told him about planting rose bushes in our yard, about our cat Maggie sleeping on his pillow every night, about how kind neighbors dropped by to check on me. I kept my letters bright and hopeful, hiding the loneliness and fear that gnawed at me. I wanted to be strong for him, to be his light in the darkness, even as each day without him felt like a small battle of my own. But as the months passed, loneliness dug its claws in deep. Nights were the worst. I'd wake up reaching for him, only to find a cold, empty bed. I was 22 and felt like a war widow in all but name, constantly dreading that knock on the door that could shatter my world. The news on TV showed jungles on fire and soldiers knee-deep in mud, the casualty counts rising. I watched every broadcast, heart in my throat, wondering if Jack was among those faceless figures in the chaos. Sleep was fitful when it came, haunted by nightmares. In one dream, I saw Jack across a field and ran to him, but just as I reached him, he vanished, leaving me screaming awake in the middle of the night. Around this time, in late 1971, I met Michael. He moved in next door to care for his elderly aunt, Mary. Michael was a quiet, kind man in his early 30s. A training injury had kept him from military service, so he was one of the few young men still in town. We first spoke on an October evening when I was struggling to carry a basket of firewood to my porch. "Need a hand?" he asked gently. I nodded gratefully, and he carried the load for me. In the weeks that followed, Michael often checked in on me. He brought over little kindnesses, fresh apples from the market, a spare light bulb when my porch lamp went out. We would chat on the porch or over the fence. He talked about his childhood in Kansas and how he once dreamed of being a pilot. I talked about Jack, how we met, how proud I was of him, how much I missed him. Sharing my fears and hopes with someone who listened so patiently felt like a relief, a small island of companionship in a sea of loneliness. I told myself we were just two neighbors helping each other through hard times. Winter came, and with it longer nights. One January evening in 1972, a blizzard knocked out the town's power. I huddled under blankets by the fireplace, the house dark and silent, worry for Jack heavy in my mind. A knock sounded at my door. It was Michael, bundled in snow boots and a coat, holding a lantern and a thermos. "I thought you might be cold and alone," he said softly. "Brought some hot soup." I welcomed him in from the storm. We sat by the fire, sharing soup straight from the thermos, sitting close to keep warm. The glow of the flames danced around the room as we talked quietly. We chatted about small things at first, our favorite winter memories, his aunt's quirky habits, anything but the war. For a short time, I almost felt normal. But a lull in the conversation brought back the heavy silence of everything I tried to forget. My thoughts drifted, and I realized tears were sliding down my face, the loneliness and fear breaking through. I wiped them quickly, but Michael had already seen. Without a word, he reached and put his hand over mine. It was a simple gesture of comfort, and my resolve crumbled. I leaned into him, needing solace, and he wrapped an arm around me. Before I knew it, we were kissing. The kiss was gentle and filled with the sadness we both carried. The moment it ended, guilt crashed over me. I pulled away, heart pounding. I'm sorry. I can't," I stuttered, voice barely above a whisper. Michael's eyes were full of regret. He apologized softly, and an awkward, painful silence settled between us. He left soon after, disappearing into the swirling snow. The minute the door closed, I sank to the floor and sobbed. I cried until my throat was raw, horrified by what I'd done. Even that single innocent kiss felt like a betrayal of Jack's trust and love. I told myself it would never, ever happen again. For weeks I avoided Michael, mortified and determined to stay true to my husband in every way. But fate tested me in the cruelest way. In March 1972, the letter arrived. An official letter from the Army informed me that Sergeant Jack Thompson was missing in action after a mission gone wrong near the Laotian border. Missing, not confirmed dead, not safely alive, just missing. I read the words in a daze, my vision blurred, my hands shaking. The world spun, and I had to sit down on the kitchen floor to keep from fainting. This was a new kind of agony, a limbo worse than death or life. Jack was simply gone without a trace, and I was left to imagine every terrible possibility. After that, days and nights lost meaning. I was drowning in fear and grief. Neighbors checked on me, friends urged me to have faith. But their words sounded hollow. Every time the phone rang, my heart seized. terrified it would bring news of a body found or, cruelly, no news at all. I spent hours by the window staring out at nothing, whispering prayers into the void. I felt like I was made of porcelain, one hard knock away from shattering completely. In my weakest moment, I turned to the only person who understood my loneliness. One rainy evening, I found myself at Michael's doorstep. I don't even clearly recall walking there. I just remember standing in the rain, soaked and shaking, and then his door opening and his concerned face before I fell into his arms. All the pain, fear, and sorrow poured out of me in a torrent of sobs. Michael held me, his own eyes shining with empathy. He didn't try to talk, he simply let me release the tide of anguish that I'd been holding back for so long. That night, desperate for comfort, I crossed a line I swore I never would. Michael and I sought solace in each other's arms. It was not passionate or romantic in the way a new love affair might be. It was two wounded people clinging to each other in a storm, trying to feel anything other than emptiness and fear. In the darkness, I whispered Jack's name and cried, and Michael held me tighter, as if that could keep the hurt away for both of us. In the first gray light of dawn, reality returned with cruel clarity. I remember lying awake next to Michael, listening to his steady breathing, and feeling the weight of guilt descend like a suffocating blanket. What had I done? Jack was missing, possibly in pain or captive or worse, and I had betrayed him. The man who, at that very moment, could be crying out for me in some faraway jungle while I couldn't even finish the thought. I slipped out of Michael's bed, got dressed quietly, and left his house without waking him. The walk back to my house was cold and wet, the rain having turned to a morning drizzle. I felt numb, as if I were outside my own body, watching a stranger who wore my skin and carried my shame. Once home, I collapsed onto my bed and wept until no more tears would come. Disgust, regret, and fear coiled around my heart. I prayed feverishly for Jack's safety, and in the same breath begged for forgiveness, though I felt I deserved none. Whatever happened, I vowed I would never let this happen again. If Jack ever came home, he would have a faithful wife waiting, no matter the guilt I carried. Do something. In silence, I went to Michael later that day and told him we could never be anything more than neighbors. He understood. There were tears in his eyes as he nodded, and tears in mine as I thanked him for being there when I felt so utterly alone. We both knew our actions were born of pain, not lack of love for my husband. We said a quiet, sorrowful goodbye. A few weeks later, Michael left town to return to Kansas. Before he departed, he slipped a short letter into my mailbox, wishing me well and hoping I'd find peace. I tucked it away, unable to bear reading it more than once, and tried to close that chapter of my life forever. Alone again, I existed in a haze of waiting and praying. Months passed. Then, one cold January morning in 1973, I received the phone call that resurrected my shattered world. Jack was alive. He had been a prisoner of war, but he survived and was coming home. The relief and joy that flooded me were indescribable. I sank to my knees by the phone, letting out a sound that was half sob, half incredulous laugh. I thanked God, the universe, anyone who would listen. Emotional. Jack was coming back to me. Our reunion at the air base in California was like a scene from a dream. When I saw him step off that military plane, thinner and leaning on a cane but alive, I thought my heart might burst. I ran to him, and he caught me in his arms as I sobbed with joy. We clung to each other desperately. I'm here, he kept murmuring, his own tears falling as he held me. I realized I'd been given a miracle. In that moment, I decided that what he didn't know would not hurt him, and I would spend the rest of my life making him happy to atone for the guilt I bore. In the months that followed, I dedicated myself to caring for Jack. The war had left deep scars on him. He had lingering injuries and nightmares that woke him up screaming in the dead of night. I was there every time, holding him, whispering comforts, assuring him he was safe. By day, he worked hard to regain a sense of normalcy. He found a job fixing cars at a local garage and tried to smile through the pain. I put on a smile too, hiding any trace of the turmoil inside me. Outwardly, we were the picture of a couple who survived a great trial and came out stronger. Only I knew that I still carried a secret that felt heavier with each passing year. Time went on. We moved back to our hometown, into a cozy little house not far from where we grew up. We never managed to have children, perhaps fate, perhaps the aftermath of all we endured. But our life was quiet and in many ways good. We had neighborhood barbecues, took road trips to see the Grand Canyon and Niagara Falls, and grew older side by side. We laughed together, supported each other through illnesses and bad days, and shared a deep bond formed in both love and adversity. Yet underneath, I never truly escaped the shadow of my wrongdoing. I lived in quiet fear that someday Jack would find out, or that I would slip and reveal it. I feared the look in his eyes if he ever learned that, while he was suffering in a distant land, I had betrayed our vows. So I continued to bury it. I poured all the love I could into him, hoping it might silently redeem me. More than 40 years passed. We grew old, and then one spring day, that carefully buried truth finally came to light. We were sorting through boxes in the attic, doing some spring cleaning. In an old keepsake box, I stumbled on Michael's goodbye note and a small photograph of him and me together. My heart nearly stopped. I thought I had gotten rid of all evidence, but there it was, in my trembling hands, a forgotten relic of a painful past. I quickly slipped the note and photo into my pocket, intending to dispose of them secretly, but in my flustered state I wasn't as subtle as I thought. Later that evening, Jack approached me in the kitchen. In his hand he held the note and the photo. My stomach dropped. I must have gone pale because he looked as stricken as I was. He set them on the table and in a quiet, hurt voice he asked, "Linda, what is this?" I felt faint. I opened my mouth to speak, but at first nothing came out. My eyes blurred with tears as I realized I had no lie left, no escape. So I chose the only path left, the truth. I broke down sobbing and told him everything. I told him how lonely and broken I was without him, how I truly believed he might never come home. I confessed that I found comfort in another's arms, and that it was the greatest mistake of my life. I pleaded through tears, telling him I never stopped loving him, not for an instant, and that I had lived with the guilt every single day since. I begged for his forgiveness, hardly able to look at him as I fell apart, pouring out decades of remorse onto the kitchen table between us. When I finally dared to lift my eyes, I saw tears in Jack's eyes as well. His face, older and lined with the years, looked as heartbroken as it had the day he left for war. There was a long silence, punctuated only by the ticking clock and my muffled sobs. At last, in a voice that shook with emotion, he simply said, "I know." I stared at him, confused and crying as he continued. In halting words, he revealed that he had suspected something for years. A neighbor's offhand comment not long after he returned had planted a seed of doubt. One day, when his fear and curiosity got the better of him, he searched and found a letter I had written, but never sent to Michael, hidden in old papers. Reading it confirmed his worst fears. Jack's voice trembled as he told me how that discovery devastated him, how after surviving the horrors of war, he came home to a hurt he never expected. I covered my mouth, sobbing, listening to the pain I had caused him, pain he had never once let slip in all our years together. He then took my hand, the same hand that was clutching a tissue, shaking like a leaf, and looked into my eyes with a tenderness I didn't understand. I was angry, he admitted softly. I was broken. I felt like I wasn't enough, but I never stopped loving you, Lynn. Hearing his old nickname for me made me break down all over again, emotional. I saw how you suffered with me after the war, he continued, tears streaming down his cheeks. I saw the guilt in your eyes even though I couldn't name it, and I realized that the woman I loved was human and hurting, and she needed me, just as I needed her. I forgave you, even if you never knew. I just didn't know how to bring it up. I didn't want to lose you. I was stunned. Jack had known, or at least suspected, almost our entire marriage, and still he stayed, and still he loved me. A wave of relief and shame and gratitude all mingled together as I collapsed into his arms. I kept saying, I'm sorry, I'm so sorry, and he kept saying, shh, it's okay. We held each other on the kitchen floor, both of us crying like the two old fools in love that we were. That night we talked for hours, until the first light of dawn peeked through the window. It was a painful conversation, but a healing one. He told me more about how he felt when he found out, and I told him everything he wanted to know, answering questions that had lingered in silence all those years. We faced the wounds together instead of hiding from them. By the time the sun rose, we were exhausted, but something heavy had lifted. In the years since that day, Jack and I have found a peace that we never had before. We have no more secrets between us. Our love, tested and scarred as it is, feels more solid than ever. We talk openly now, even about hard things, and it feels like we truly understand each other in a deeper way. As I sit here on our porch with Jack by my side, watching a soft dusk settle over the trees, I am filled with gratitude. Jack dozes lightly in his chair, our hands still loosely interlaced. I glance at him, at the gentle face of the man who gave me his heart so many years ago, and who found it in himself to forgive me for breaking it. His breathing is a bit labored these days, and I know our time together isn't infinite, but that only makes each moment more precious. Our story is not a fairy tale. It's messy and human. We stumbled, we fell, and we found our way back to each other. From the vantage of old age, I can say this: love is not just the sunshine, the easy days, the kisses in the moonlight. Love is also what sees you through the storms. It's what made Jack hold on to us despite his hurt, and what made me face my darkest truth in the end. Love is what forgave and what ultimately saved us. If there's one thing I hope you take from my story, it's that it's never too late for truth and never too late for forgiveness. Secrets fester in the dark, but when you bring them into the light, that's when healing can finally begin. We had so many lost years of unspoken pain, but we found redemption in the end. Because as long as there is love, even a fragile, flickering love, there is hope. As the first stars blink into view above us, I gently squeeze Jack's hand, and he stirs, giving me a drowsy, content smile. It's time to go inside. We will head in together, as we always have, side by side. As I help Jack up, he jokes softly about his creaky knees, and I give a little smile. We walk slowly into the house, and I catch a glimpse of our reflection in the window. Two white-haired souls leaning on each other. In that reflection, I see every version of us that came before. The young bride and groom under the oak tree, the weary soldier and his anxious wife, the couple who weathered the storms of life. We're still here, we made it, together. Tonight, when we fall asleep, it will be in peace, unburdened, together, and in love.